Hey guys, this is Parney from Dash Car Productions, and today's video is going to be about what is pre-ignition / knock. Now, pre-ignition and knock actually get mixed up a lot. They're actually not the same thing. They are two different things, but they are connected together. Now, before we get into today's video, if you guys can please hit that subscribe button, I really appreciate it. And do check out my last video about the 4-stroke engine. It's going to be really helpful because it'll make a little more sense of why we're starting off at the compression, which is the 2nd stroke. Let's get started. We have our intake valve closed, our exhaust valve closed, we have our spark plug, and we have our fuel injector, and we have our piston. Now in the compression stroke, the piston is going to be coming up. Now in the cylinder, we also have our air and our oxygen getting mixed together, and then at a certain point or a certain timing, let's say in this case 10 degrees, the spark plug is going to go off. Now how I got that 10 degrees is pretty much the angle of the crank related to the top dead center of the piston. So the top dead center of the piston is when the piston is at the very top of the cylinder. So at 10 degrees, our spark plug is going to shoot off. And once it shoots off, it's going to create a flame front going downwards. Now, as that's going downwards, it's actually increasing the pressure of the cylinder from both sides. So from the flame front and the piston, we have a double whammy of increase of pressure. And that's really important because as we're really increasing the pressure, the molecules are starting to rub together a lot faster, and that's going to create a spontaneous combustion or pre-ignition. So what's going to happen is a spark's going to shoot off over here, and now we have two flame fronts going at different angles. And as you can imagine, that's not very good for your engine, and that's how potentially a lot of damage to the engine can happen, and you can blow your engine, you can break the rod or destroy your crank. It's not a good situation. It is important to note that knock happens to every single engine, and most of the time is not damaging, so it's very normal for it to happen. It's just when you're driving aggressively or your tune is not done right, that's when issues are going to happen. So as the two flame fronts come together, it creates a shock wave that upsets the piston. So that piston is going to move side to side, and then that's what we call a piston slap, or what people will call a knock. So when people say, I hear the knock going, you're actually hearing the cylinder smash against or the piston smash against the cylinder wall. And as I said earlier, that's not very good. So you might be thinking, how do tuners prevent this? Well, there's a few things that can prevent it. And I do have this graph over here. If you just visualize this graph as like an Excel sheet, right? So let's say at 4,000 RPM and at 10 PSI. Yes, I know my drawing and artwork is not very good, but hopefully it gets the point across. So let's say in this cell here, we have a knock. So what are some of the things that tuners can do is adjust the air-fuel ratio. So when they look at your data log, they're going to see at 4,000 K or 4,000 RPM at 10 PSI, your air-fuel ratio might be, let's say, 12. Now 12 is actually pretty high if you're going wide open throttle. So how the tuners can adjust it, they're going to put in more fuel in that particular cell. So ideally what they want is the air-fuel ratio to be around 11. Now that's a safe point. It might not make the most power, but that's a really safe thing that a lot of tuners do, because a lot of people want, reliability first then power. I mean, yeah, some people just want all-out power, and all the power to them. So that's one way you can do it. Now you're thinking, why does adding more fuel help prevent knock? Well, adding more fuel cools down the cylinder, and that helps prevent the knock from happening. So that's one thing. Now keep in mind, you might be asking, why can't I drop it down to like 7 air-fuel ratio? Well, then you're just really dumping in a whole bunch of fuel, which is not very good for your catalytic converter, and you're just wasting a lot of fuel. So it's not very efficient for the car, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. The tuner makes its adjustments and tells you, okay, go wide open throttle and send me back the logs. He checks the air-fuel ratio, now it's 11, but the knock is still happening. So what he's gonna do now is adjust the timing. Now, timing is actually very complicated, and it takes there are some really smart engineers that can figure it out, and I just have a very high level understanding of it because it's very complicated. So as I mentioned before, we have our timing at 10 degrees, but we have a knock happening. So what we are going to do is going to retard the timing, or in a more simpler term is just we're going to wait longer for that spark to occur, right? So why am I asking that? Well, it's because, as I mentioned before, at 10 degrees, that flame front is going downwards, increasing the pressure. But if we're waiting for the piston to come higher before we get that spark going off, we have a better opportunity to get rid of knock. So there's less time for it to ignite. So once again, 4,000 RPM, 10 PSI, we're gonna change it to 8. And then the tuners can say, okay, go wide open throttle, send me the logs, and then he's gonna review it, and he might say, okay, now this knock doesn't happen, and now your car is good to go. Obviously, that's a very simplified view of all of this. There are so many more cells to adjust. It's just not gonna be at one point, and the tuners can adjust for power, for fuel efficiency, and obviously depending on the application or what you want from the car, or you have a supercharger or turbo, what kind of components you're doing, there's gonna be a whole bunch of factors. So the last thing you can do is increase the octane, right? So if you're putting 87 regular gas in, then bump it up to 91 octane. This all can be prevented because a higher octane is more harder to combust. All right, so that's my quick little video about what is a preignition and knock. I hope that all kind of makes a little more sense. And then in part 3 here, we're going to talk about what are the things to monitor on your COBB access port. Now, just keep in mind, this is not just for WRX. This is for like pretty much all combustible gasoline engines. It's just, I want to gear this video towards WRX, but if you have a Ferrari or a Lamborghini or a Honda Civic, this all applies, same thing. So thanks for checking this video, and we'll catch you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.